So, if you were to do any research on the internet or in any books about learning styles, then what you'll find is that most of the conventional theories around learning style says that there's a primary way that students that people learn. So, the first way is visual. Um, they can read it and comprehend it. They can see pictures, they can see charts. It's a very eye focused um, learning. And then you have the auditory or the verbal learning styles, which simply means I'd rather hear it, I'd rather listen to it, I'd rather talk about it, have a discussion. Then there is the physical learning style. Most, some theories call it kinetic, where, I want to touch, it uses all the senses. I want to smell it. I want to know what the formaldehyde smells like that keeps the frog that has to be dissected. Um, I want to feel the basketball. I want to be in movement when I learn. Um, and then there is the logical. The logical learning styles is what some people A equals E equals E in the logical world. Most lost the connection there for a moment. Have a primary and secondary. If you are visual or logical, you do real well in school. There's no issue because you can read and comprehend. Um, if there's no eye issue, no learning disability, and if you can read and comprehend and read and write, then school's not a problem, unless it's a time management issue. And logical, being a logical learner, doesn't really does well in an academic state because math and science is sequential. It's linear. It's common sense. Um, Math requires strong memory. Visual requires strong communication. Auditory, verbal, um, learning. How much of that really happens in school? I worked in a school system where they just, handed out packets. Today's lesson is a packet. And you built off of yesterday's knowledge base and you wrote the answers out to the questions or read and make comments on it. But if you're if you learn verbally, if you then what's the translation that has to happen at home in order to help your student, help your son understand what's happening? And the same way with the physical. The only physical connection where you use your senses is really in a science class or an art class or maybe a music class, if they're still offering those um, liberal arts, extracurricular, well-rounded courses in your school. And so if you find that they're verbally, if they learn verbally first and logical second, how do you translate that to help them do the work at a middle school that is visual? And so by knowing their learning styles, you know what kind of work you have to put in to help translate that content from the classroom to help them learn at home. And now let's talk a little bit about the learning connections. You know what learning styles are. You know the influence factors for learning styles. We talked about what conventional um, learning styles are discussed in the world of education. But then there's also learning connections. How does one learn? So we have the social learning connection and the solitary learning connection. And no, it's not necessarily about being an introvert or an extrovert. It's not necessarily being the popular one or the shy one. It really speaks to how best the learning style meets the need to keep your son motivated to keep up the good work academically. And if they're not keeping up the good work academically, to do the work academically. And if they can't do the work academically, can they have an interest in the work academically? See, you really got to understand the motivation and the mind that your son is in so that we see where those growth areas are and how we teach them and model them by not yelling and screaming and threatening all the time. So does he do better in a social setting? Have you had the experience where they're playing a video game and it's 10 of them on from their different houses, all playing the same game? Or do you find that they prefer to play the video games by themselves? Do they think better when they're by themselves? Or do they need the stimulation of other people around them to constantly drop nuggets to expand on what that conversation and what that topic is? And also, it's important to know that all 10-year-olds have the same vocabulary. All sixth graders pretty much have the same vocabulary. So nobody is bringing anything new to the table. That's the job of the parent and the teacher and the librarian, tutor, all of those who make up that educational support team to push forward more information, more concepts, more lifelong learning tips to keep the mind moving forward. If we don't keep the mind moving forward, then your son will only believe what they see on social media. They will never learn to think for themselves. They will never learn what they like and what they don't like because they're constantly having people in social media tell them what they should like and what they shouldn't like. And so I want you to think about the learning connections and how your son, through your observation, really fit in. Are they more of a solitary learner, or are they a social learner, or are they a little of both? And if they are a little of both, what's solitary? Is that writing or science? Is if they're social, is that history and social studies? So we really want to take the time as a parent, as a guardian, as someone responsible for that son in middle school to really outline who they are so that you can support them in the way that they needed to be supported academically. Junior high school, middle school is not elementary. There is no one teacher teaching all subjects. There is no quiet time. There is no group work. There's not one teacher teaching all subjects. You have to know so that you can support appropriately. And I'm not saying that you don't know your son, because you do know. What I'm saying is that you have to be a little more intentional in observing, in discussing, in conversations, so that you can get a feel for what's the next step is.